The story begins by showing the protagonist explaining that he was using objects more valuable than large cars, covering the cost of portions more expensive than most college enrollments. He said it was all a matter of self-esteem. He worked hard to get the real PK. For those who do not know, PK is a murderer, like a player who kills another player in some famous MMORPG game. He wondered what he was doing in that world 2 years ago. Koz, who was under his control, rebelled and tried to overthrow him. He became the most powerful monarch. He always thought about that moment and admitted that he still did not overcome it. He believed that it would not be solved after decades. This game was known as a line, very similar to life itself. They were the ones who made him give up at that moment. He was in a common job for many people around the world, betrayed by the people he trusted the most. A bag of money falls on the table. He said that instead of him, those guys chose money and treasures. He was the strongest monarch in online history and said that they tried to get him out of his way. He realized that, when he finally died in the game, a message appeared. You have died, and also with death you lose all your objects and you are transported to the nearest city. The protagonist said that he did not trust anyone because it was his greatest regret, and at that moment he was alone. He declared that he would devour everything alone and take first place again, but his current level was not suitable for his goal. In fact, he was quite far away. As time went by as a monarch, his fingers aged and control became impossible. He said that at that time it was very difficult. He could not do it at all. Although he tried hard, his mind told him to stop and give up. He sold the account, opened his store, and all the money to sell his account showed that dying was not so bad. He still managed to get ahead in life, but he said it would have been much better if he had not distributed his income among them. It was not supposed that he was going to lose that battle, and he shouted that someone's chicken was ready. Ah, the chicken. Then, the motorcycle messenger ended up picking up the delivery, and he ended up getting off and said that he did it more or less that day. He ends up taking a little spray to relax, because he was already tired and hot. He turns on the television and begins to see that newspaper that was in the newspaper, which said that from the next day the fate that everyone was anxiously waiting for would officially begin, and asked if the person watching were also waiting. He did not know what destiny was that and asked what the heck is that. He mocks and says that if he had been only 3 years younger, they would have classified him immediately, but he was already too old for that. But he is afraid because the television said that the famous players are also showing considerable interest in the opening of Fate or Lightning, if they prefer, and this interest comes especially from the Guild of Online War Machines. In that interview, they expressed their determination. The protagonist asks if it was a war machine. The journalist continued to say that they were the Kasos, the sacred. He said that these players could not avoid it. They are well-known users. Everyone declared that they point to the top of Fate. Well, the protagonist is furious. He was really angry and said in his thoughts that if he depended on him, he would go in immediately and see if this is good or not. But then he got discouraged and said that it would not work. He said that 2 years had passed since he stopped playing and came back from nowhere, so it was not magic. The newspaper continued to say that the game, the content was infinite and had many users who could not wait, so he asked his friend where he could get that capsule, which was essential to enjoy the decoration or fate, which is the name of the game. The boy said looking at the camera that the diver's capsule was very powerful and could be bought on the official website of D, and if someone was interested or had difficulties, he could contact the attention service to the BIM client, and they would be delighted to provide assistance. The protagonist shows interest in this capsule because he did not know about it. He begins to realize that it was a virtual reality capsule. He is surprised that he had already left. He continues to say that it was also a moment in which the players played with brainwaves and said that the world was really wonderful, but then it freezes suddenly. He says that this means that there is no manual control involved, that is, keyboard, mouse, controller, etc. He subtly manages to have an animation and says that he will remember once again the difference between a monarch and a lot of garbage and that he will not let it go. After a while, he returns home and is surprised to see something on his laptop. He says that the value of that console was very ridiculous and it was also practically exhausted. It was 10 million yuan. It would take him weeks in order to get that capsule and it will be a fortune. So, he says that he will need to fry chicken to get ahead of the others. so he would live life for now as a real game. He is really excited to try to start again and says that he is really going to try it and be successful. After a month, he finally gets that capsule, enters to try it and ends up lying in it, turning on his glasses. He says that he needs to adapt to that virtual reality and that it has been 2 years from the online legends. The system notifies him that the session has started and he is lying on the grass. He slowly opens his eyes, gets up a little and puts his hand on his face. He starts looking around him and realizes that the game was wonderful and says it was incredible because it was very real. In fact, he didn't even feel like a game. The system notifies him that the character has been created successfully and the protagonist must choose a nickname. He is happy to try to choose a nickname and says that the name of his character would be X. The short scene of Neville cast had 5 adventurers gathered in the place, looked to one side and wondered how long he had been doing that. In addition, they didn't even know how many hours had passed, and the other one on the right wondered if he really was a person, a player, or could be a bot. But one of them said that it would not be possible because that game used brainwaves, so there would be no way to have a bot and the NPCs he had are all stupid. The dish was killing those NPCs and was only gaining experience. The system said that with excellent concentration and effort, the resistance would increase and could even achieve a passive skill called swing. After that, the system notifies him that he has increased in level. A window appears with his name, in this case, but he still had no title or profession. He went to another place to hunt since it was late in the game and he wanted to, as quickly as possible to reach the top of the game. After a while, he said that he walked a lot through that forest at first and said that it seemed as if he had already reached very deep. He took out his sword and said that he was going to hunt all the monsters he found in that forest. He uses an attack called precision swing that ends up killing a deer and gains experience. But then a red window appears saying that the hunger bar was at 10% and he stops and thinks, "Hey, are you hungry?" He said that it was not surprising that he began to feel real hunger and this was clearly strange for him. He said that although he was basically in the middle of nowhere, he would have to try to find something to eat in that place. He said he thought he had some bread in his inventory and he actually managed the system to tell him that he had selected that bread. But something happens. He does not understand anything. The bread simply falls to the ground and the protagonist gets a little nervous because someone had stolen the bread from him. The boy simply starts eating the bread and says that it was very delicious and the protagonist asks who that guy was, until an unknown man appears on the head of that boy and the protagonist already realizes that he was not a guy, he was an NPC. He said it was different for NPCs because they are always going somewhere. He said there must be some reason for this. The protagonist said he must be hungry and had 2 breads and asked if he would like one more. The boy starts drooling and says he wants it, and the protagonist tells him that he can eat as many as he wants. That guy said that at least 300 years had passed since he had eaten something like that, and the protagonist is even surprised. 300 years? Really? And the guy says it didn't matter because where he had to go, he couldn't let that precious thing go to waste. The protagonist said it must be something really good and begins to think that it is probably some kind of reward. The guy shows a crystal ball and says it's all he has and asks the protagonist to accept it. Also, the system warns that it is an unknown candy and the protagonist wonders what he will do with that, but he ends up thanking him anyway. He begins to think that exchanging bread for candy is a total loss and asks if at least that item has some kind of effect. At least he would try it. He says that his common sense tells him that it could be a trap, but even if it were, he was a beginner with no possibility of dying. He looked at for a few moments and said he break the light, stands still for a few seconds, and ended up eating the ground. That man was total strange looking protagonist, as they weakened someday. After a while, the protagonist said he thought and said that smells very delicious. He realized it was food. His face dropped it. In the end, he realized that it was just no food until he saw some snack. It was. That same boy was standing there. Protagonist wonders if he was in kind of office or something like that. The protagonist guessed that it seemed he was waiting for someone and said that he often.
Después de un tiempo, el protagonista simplemente se despierta y dice que ese olor era muy delicioso. Cuando se da cuenta de que era comida, se desespera por intentar conseguirlo, pero al final se da cuenta de que era solo una ilusión hasta que escucha un ruido y mira hacia atrás. Era ese mismo chico que estaba parado allí. El protagonista se pregunta si era algún tipo de jefe o algo así. El protagonista comienza a pensar que parecía que estaba esperando a alguien y dijo que a menudo
and said that often the sun would set and the darkness would fall. Many times the seasons would change and the weather would change, and the person he was waiting for would never arrive, and the person he was waiting for would never appear, but he would never stop cooking. After he starts looking at the protagonist and says that the man was looking there for a long time. After that, suddenly, the protagonist wakes up and was in the middle of nowhere with rain. He puts his hand on his head and did not understand what was happening at all and wonders if it was just a dream. The system warns him that he has obtained a hidden class called Heavenly Gourmet and was very doubtful about this hidden class. The passive skill swing learned to focus his attacks on his enemies by increasing his success rate by 30%. With Heavenly Gourmet, he discovers and feels the hidden flavors of food, and with Heavenly Gourmet, he can grind objectives with celestial touch, increasing the drop rate of objects and ingredients of higher quality than normal grinding. The protagonist wonders what kind of hidden class this is, because he had never heard of it and had not planned to eat alone. A window appears in the system saying that the skill is active and creates a celestial dish that transcends the mundane dishes, and there is a special category of celestial dishes and their effects vary according to the quality of the protagonist. Wondering what kind of different dishes these are, in addition to their special ranks, he wonders if this was a class similar to being a chef. Another window of the system ends up appearing, and the mission of the class was to discover the truth about the Gourmet King. The legend of the Gourmet King has gone around the world, and as a celestial gourmet, he has the ability to discover this legend, and no one could also predict that he would bring the truth of the legend. But it was for the protagonist to know that the history of the world of destiny was in his hands, and the previous requirement was to obtain the celestial gourmet class that he already had. He did not mention any reward he would give. The protagonist was also very surprised because the difficulty of the mission had not been mentioned, and he also said that there were stories of BIM. In this case, the game itself was in his hands. The protagonist begins to think that he should not be scared by all those big words in the mission, and at that moment he had to prioritize revealing the truth behind that legend, although he had never spoken of this Gourmet King before. Before that, he opens an inventory and takes out a bread. He said he wanted to test his ability to feel different flavors. He ends up biting, and two windows of the system appear. He had discovered the hidden taste. It was being absorbed by the protagonist. He says that the bread was soft and could sense the taste, that it was brand new. He wondered how the bread could taste so delicious. The system warns that his maximum resistance had increased by 13 points. In addition to that, his strength had also increased by 2 points. He laughed that he could increase his stats by just eating the bread. He laughs and squeezes that bread. He ends up apologizing for the game of saying bad things about his class. A while later, he was in the forest and was eating many things, and the taste. "I'm sorry, I'll let you know that you discovered a hidden flavor," etc. In addition, he was only increasing his resistance and strength just by eating things. He said he was very well and wondered what would happen if he ate another. He said it had the same flavor, but the stats did not increase that time. But he looks back and sees several monsters. He starts preparing to attack and says that eating the same wouldn't work, he would need to change the menu. He ends up positioning himself to attack that monster, and in a second he cuts his head. He said he was very curious to see what that deer meat would taste like. The system warns him that he has obtained the meat of that satiated animal, of that deer meat. It was very fresh and it was 100%. Its classification was rare. The system warns him that the meat was acquired by a delicate touch, so it was value more than the market. The dish also manages to obtain soft skin, and its classification was also rare. The thick deer skin was recovered with a very delicate touch, making it softer, more resistant, and much more valuable. Its special effects were that the NPC's ability to sell that item would increase slightly, and the equipment made with that material had the effect of increasing agility in 2x3. The protagonist said that he really only won 2 items for killing a deer, and that with that he could earn a good amount of money even if he killed more deer, since he was prepared for more. He said it was time to start the main course, and the remaining deer began to run, and the protagonist shouted at them to wait. The scene cuts to Narby's shopping street, in Ruben's general store. Ruben asked the protagonist to take him to that store, since he was the owner. The protagonist said he had gotten some deer skins to sell. Ruben apologized, but he did not believe that he could offer more. a very high price due to the great offer he had received lately. The protagonist places all the skins on the table, which were a total of 10, and they all shone since they were rare. Reuben is very impressed, since they were very soft, begins to count 1, 2, 3, and asks how he got all those impeccable pieces. He ends up asking the protagonist if he has more skins like that. He explained that they were high-quality products highly requested by the nobles, and could offer a very good price for them. The protagonist says he could get more, but the problem is that he would like to know how much he would pay for each piece. Reuben was very nervous, even sweating, and asked how much he would like. The protagonist. The boy said that he would like a gold coin, and it was 1 per piece. Reuben despairs because this was a lot, and the protagonist thought that having the courage to do important business was very important. He told Reuben that if he accepted, he could continue bringing as many as he wanted, and continued in his thoughts, saying that this was something he learned working in that fried chicken business for 2 years. The guy said that everything was fine. He would buy all the pieces for a gold coin each. Reuben continued saying that the next time the protagonist had something like that, he had to go first to his store to sell it, and ended up giving him 30 gold coins and 40 silver coins. After a while, the protagonist realized that he had 30 gold coins and 40 coins from the protagonist. He was thinking that the expenses of that month were hard, so he was thinking he could change those coins to some money. In real life, he should also buy a good set of armor. He needed to obtain the best armor and get the best items to resell. The scene cuts to the bites in the fields of Narville. A boy was thinking that it would be possible to reach the goal of being in the top 100 every month at that pace, but he had no connections, talent, or money. He commented that the others seemed not to want to go up either, and he wondered if he should give up. The protagonist was cutting and killing all those monsters, and the boy ends up noticing the protagonist. He wonders what the protagonist is doing. He begins to observe him, and realizes that he has a beginner armor that is not capable of defending against all those bison. But seeing the ease with which the protagonist kills those monsters, he says that he would be able to level up a lot if there was someone like that in his group. He begins to think that this is his opportunity, that he has to take advantage of it, and finally he will be able to level up. He ends up going down that mountain and raises his hand towards the protagonist, but an energy ends up surrounding the protagonist, and this one moves immediately. The boy could not believe that he had such bad luck, and the system warns him that he has been successful. The boy begins to cry, of course. And in the protagonist's apartment, he gets up and wonders who was calling him from behind before leaving. He was not even sure that he was thinking that maybe it was just his imagination. After a while he showers and goes to eat something, because no one is made of iron, right? No, he says that he showered, ate something, and filled the biogel. He said that everything was fine and he was ready. He said that he had previously investigated and saw that the titles are very important, so he wanted to see if he got some good titles. The cell phone said that there was a title that he could obtain by hunting 100 monsters of a level higher than his. However, the monsters that he managed to hunt in a group would not count, so it would be useless. He said that there was no problem, because if he spoke without monsters, he would win the title, so it was fine. He ends up turning on his glasses and starting to join the game, thinking that this would be super easy for the former professional player like him. Finally, he returns to the game and says that the levels of the bison were more than 20 and his current level was 18. If he wanted to hunt a monster of a level higher than his, joining a group would normally be the easiest way, but that had nothing to do with him. At that moment, he has an angry vision. In front of him, the two begin to look at each other and ask the bison what he would like. He is really curious and is already advancing, saying that he is going to eat it, and he has a stoke. In the end, he got XP out of it and meat from the bison. He ends up to give a bite. 2 windows of the system seem to say that the succulence of the bison meat were absorbed by the body. A celestial palate says that he has discovered the flavor of the bison meat. The cult force of the bison meat has also increased by 10 points. He says that this is unbalanced since he is getting statistics just by eating. He says that although he has his disadvantages, it does not help much in the fight, so he needs to learn the technique by himself. Even so, it is a small price to pay for such an incredible ability. He wonders what the developers were thinking when creating a profession or class like that. At that time, he is at level 18 with a fame of 13.